if you think of an electric guitar, or if someone had to draw an electric guitar, they'd probably draw something like this. This would be the shape they see as what an electric guitar looks like. And I think, you know, its impact has been absolutely phenomenal. You just got to look at the way it's been used right across the board, from our kind of music through Jimi Hendrix, to the blues players, to heavier guys like Ritchie Blackmore, Yngwie Malmsteen. You know, right across the board, its versatility is tremendous as an instrument, depending on the amplifiers you put it with. It is just the guitar. And will anyone ever make a better looking instrument than that? Everything is so right on it, isn't it?
The first time that I heard a Stratocaster was when I really heard one. You know, I'd seen them, but I never heard one like this one before. And this was played by Philip Guy, Buddy Guy's brother. And he was playing in this club in Eugene, Oregon. And he had this sound, and he was playing through a super reverb with just the right amount of reverb on it. And the sound was like, it's like somebody threw a coin across some very thin ice. It was just like this brittle, biting, but, you know, really precise sound. It was the best sound I've ever heard in my life. And it just so happened that about a week or so later, this guy was selling his Stratocaster in 1964. It was leaving town, and I was able to pick it up. It was great.
To this day, the Stratocaster is such a beautiful instrument. You know, you look at it, it's the contours, the look, the playability, the sound. You can't beat it.
There's so much tone in these things. Using the Fender as well, the Fender amp coupled with Marshalls, you've got best of both worlds. You've got razor sharp, crisp rhythm stuff, and for that, you know, you don't want much distortion. You know, that sings for that. The Marshall, then you power chords and all that. It's got it covered, really. Plus I've got this on here now, the old humbucker in there. Switch that in and out, and away you go. That's all you need, really.
I have to say, this guitar is an amazing thing. Why it sounds like it sounds is just a fluke. People have imitated it. There's been copies made all over the place. They do the same thing I did. They take the thing here and the thing here, and people have done it. And I've played some of these copies, and they don't sound like this. We just came up lucky here. And it really is a good instrument.
Oh my God, the sound, the tone, I love it. It's just, to me, this just agrees with me. I love the neck, I love the feel. This is my 78. I mean, I absolutely love this guitar. I've tried other guitars, I just feel like this fits me better. This helps me to bring out the voice that I feel that I have. And that's what it's about for me. I wouldn't trade it in for the world. I'm a Strat girl all the way.
If someone says electric guitar, I see a Strat. And the design itself is just perfect. When you hold it, it becomes one with you. So many people tried to copy it, but they did it right the first time. And the versatility in the sound, you know, not only with the pickups that I've got in mind, but you can change them and do so many different things. My playing has changed so much over the years that it's kind of adapted around a Fender guitar, you know, either a Tele or a Strat, with the way the neck feels. I've got my own model with Fender as well, so it really is the guitar that I play. You know, I almost can't play another guitar.
It was sort of like that Stratocaster. You could turn that thing up and blow the back end out of a building, and you could also you could really pop it. I did a lot of that with my thumb pick, and it sounded like a baseball bat hitting up against a brick wall, kind of. It really was a good rock and roll sound.
The first one that I actually saw, the first Strat that I actually saw, was in the little music shop at the bottom of Salters Road in Newcastle, where I lived, and it was a flamingo pink one turned up there. It was like something that had come down from outer space, actually.
I love that pure sound. I mean, it's just a great rhythm sound, it's a great boogie sound, it's a great blues sound. I mean, it just seems to adapt itself to everything. There seems to be no limit to what it can do. Maybe we'll see it in a symphony orchestra someday. Who knows?
What I like about the Stratocaster is it's a great rhythm guitar. And right now, this particular band format is a quartet. And we have an organist. And when he solos, I like to play rhythm. I like to play rhythm all the time anyway. It's like, I want to be part of the band, you know. And it's a great rhythm guitar. And it's also a great solo guitar. What I like about it is there's a lot of sounds that can be had out of this guitar. And it's like, you know, I like to play at the bridge and just get this bite that's just like it's sick. You know, if you have the right amplifier, you can get a great bite out of it, and you can get really just killing treble sound out of it, you know, when you play solos. But then I also like to play solos in the second or the first position as well. It all depends on what you want. It's got it all, you know. It's a beautiful machine.
It's the same old story, really. You know, it's irreplaceable. It's worth more to me than absolutely anything else I own.
Before I go on stage, the first thing I do is I'm like, be good to me today. I'm serious. I'm like, let's do what we do. Be good to me today, please, and I'll be good to you.
This guitar, I think it's fair to say, with Hank playing it, because it was Hank's guitar, I think Hank Marvin created the group boom that we're still in today, because the Shadows Apache changed the world, I think, for a lot of people. Certainly did for us. But the group boom came from the Cliff and the Shadows situation. And if Cliff hadn't bought this and imported it, who knows where we'd be now.
I've got a really lovely old 58, you know, which I had to have one because I was such a big Buddy Holly fan, you know. As soon as I could afford one, or whenever I could find one, you know, I thought I had to buy one, you know, and it's a really good one. But if I'm doing an album project in Los Angeles, where I can take a lot of guitars and leave them there for a week, you know, then I'll definitely take the Strat, because it's obviously such a unique sounding guitar, you know.
The story of the Fender Stratocaster begins here in Fullerton, California, some 40 miles south of Los Angeles. This was the hometown of Clarence Leo Fender, whose name today is synonymous with the electric guitar. During the Depression of the 1930s, Leo dropped his ambition of a career in accountancy to open a radio shop on South Spadra Street. It was 1939. At his store, Leo Fender sold records, radios, and musical instruments. He had an interest in amplification and provided PA systems for local events. He also had a repair department at the back of his store, which became his musical instrument laboratory. The early 1940s was the heyday of the lap steel or Hawaiian guitar, an early electric instrument which relied on pickups and amplifiers. The simplicity of the lap steel, which, as the name implies, is played horizontally on the knees, led Leo to consider producing his own instruments. More technician than musician, Leo's designs were developed by establishing a rapport with local performers who gave him valuable feedback on their practical requirements on California bandstands. This process of consultation became an important element of Leo Fender's instrument development throughout his career. By 1946, Leo had formed the Fender Electric Instrument Company to produce and sell lap steel guitars and amplifiers. But more ambitious and revolutionary projects lay on his workbench. He moved his repair shop cum lab from the back of his radio store here to South Pomona Avenue. Although the site is today a parking lot, its significance has not been forgotten. The success of Fender owed much to the marketing skills of Don Randall, who became Leo's business partner. By 1953, Don had established Fender sales to promote and distribute Leo's instruments. During the infamous CBS takeover of Fender in 1965, it was Don Randall who handled negotiations. While Leo was in his workshop, Don took care of business.
Well, Leo was not a merchandiser, for one thing. He was very good at what he did, but he wasn't a merchandiser. Of course, it fell to me to do the rest of the merchandising that went on. Leo was a strange man, very strange man, because he was very backward and very one way, and you just had to know how to handle him to get along with him. He wasn't an out front man at all. He stayed in the factory and as far back in the factory as he could get most of the time, and spent most all of his time fiddling with the various instruments in front of a test bench that he had that he used. He was a very interesting guy, though. He didn't have any really close friends, I don't think. Even his wife, I don't think, was very close to him. He certainly wasn't a genius anyway. The things that happened because of the progress that was made along the line. The first guitars they made were almost unusable. But he just kept fiddling around with it and kept going, and eventually they turned out pretty well. And he had some help along the sides too. Fred Tavares and other guys that worked there were very instrumental in these things.
During the late 1930s, American guitar manufacturers such as Rickenbacker, Gibson, and Epiphone were experimenting with electric pickups on their instruments. Jazzman Trevor Owen is here playing a 1937 Gibson ES-150 fitted with an original Charlie Christian bar pickup designed by Walt Fuller. He's playing through a vintage Gibson amp.
This is the first production electric guitar, this one here, with an electromagnetic pickup on it. Several attempts have been made before that to electrify the guitar because in those days the guitar could not really be heard acoustically above, say, a big band or something like that, and the guitar had always been used as a rhythm instrument. So, apart from Django Reinhardt, who was European, not American, he played acoustically, but in a different setup because he had like a guitar backing as opposed to a big band backing. So they needed the guitar to be much louder. And several attempts, even Charlie Christian, which is what this guitar is called, this is called the Charlie Christian guitar. Charlie Christian not only enabled the guitar to be heard over a loud band, but he also played the guitar in a certain way. He developed a style of playing. The rock guys, the country guys, all these people are still using his licks today, and they might not realize it, but it all came from Charlie Christian. One of the reasons that a solid guitar was invented or created was to stop this feedback problem that you have. This guitar resonates. It's an acoustic guitar basically with a pickup on. So therefore, as soon as you get this large bodied guitar and you try and electrify it, you are going to produce this feedback problem. A lot of it is to do with the placement on the amplifier. It has to be over there. Charlie Christian very often played in photographs I've seen him with the amplifier in front of him. So yes, the problems can be overcome to a certain extent, but there is a limit. You know, you can only turn the volume up to a certain level before you start generating this feedback problem. So obviously what came after that was the solid guitar, which doesn't have that problem. People like Les Paul and Leo Fender were developing the solid guitar at that time. Les Paul simply got a guitar like this, a big acoustic guitar, and filled it with wood and called it the Log. And of course that eliminated the feedback because there's no resonance in the guitar.
Aware of Les Paul and Paul Bigsby's experiments with solid-bodied instruments, Leo could see that developing electric solids as opposed to electroacoustics was the way to go. No feedback problems and a simpler production line manufacturing process. Leo's reasoning and subsequent experiments gave the world in 1950 perhaps one of the most enduring solid-body electric guitar designs of all time, the Fender Broadcaster, subsequently renamed the Telecaster, a functional design classic which combined perfection of playability, tone, and style. It relied on a production line manufacturing process which has hardly changed to this day. The success of the Telecaster inspired Leo Fender to develop another revolutionary electric instrument, the Fender electric bass. Leo adapted the Telecaster body into a simple, uncontoured slab body 4-string bass guitar fitted with a single-piece 4-pole pickup. Released in 1951 and named the Precision Bass, this design evolved into the classic contoured body with single split-coil pickup familiar to every bassist throughout the world today. Having unleashed 2 classic electric instruments from his workshop, Leo Fender's ingenuity appeared undiminished. Unbeknownst to the Fullerton inventor, the world was on the brink of a musical revolution, and Leo Fender was the right man with the right instruments at the right time. Leo's musical taste, if he had any, would not suggest that by the mid-50s, as he perfected yet another classic instrument, a hillbilly cat from Memphis was about to change the face of popular music forever and make the Fender name as familiar as that of Elvis. Scotty Moore had bought a Fender Esquire in one of Leo's amps in 1952, but preferred to play a Gibson ES-295 on stage with the King. Bill Black saw the practical advantage of Leo's new bass, and by April 1957 had switched his stand-up instrument for a Fender Precision, which Elvis himself took delivery of just in time for the Jailhouse Rock recording sessions. Rock and roll was not the inspiration for the design of the Fender Stratocaster, but undoubtedly the Strat has been a powerful driving force throughout the history of rock music. All Leo Fender's instruments were the product of an ongoing obsessional evolutionary process which began with the Telecaster. It involved consultation with musicians, particularly Bill Carson, and collaborators at Fender like Freddie Tavares and George Fullerton. But the Stratocaster was ultimately Leo's baby. While perfecting the electric guitar preoccupied him until his death in 1991, Leo had already achieved his goal by 1954 when he unveiled the Fender Stratocaster, today regarded as the perfect and most successful electric guitar of all time. The price commanded today by guitars which came off Leo's modest production line before he sold the company to CBS in 1965 are a testament to the awe his instruments are regarded with today.
We've come up with some things in America, that have made a big difference. Certainly the guitar, the electric guitar, made a huge difference to the world. Jesus. It's the most popular instrument ever been developed. First of all, more people play it than anything. Second of all over the world. Those hillbillies in the bars down in Wilmington and San Pedro who wanted to be loud and were tired of playing these old woofy sounding acoustic electrics that were really not very good. They wanted something, and this is what Leo came up with, and it is an amazing example of American ingenuity of there is a need for something, there is something out there, let's see if we can make it. And so he did. And they liked it apparently, and they took it to heart and used it. And then the thing caught on. But the amount to which it caught on is far greater exponentially than the world of that music at that time, which was this tiny little, you could say Southern California or even California country western scene.
I've had one guitar in over the years that was actually signed by Leo himself. I've only ever had one. When it was in the factory, it was designated as Sunburst. When it came here, it had been Olympic White. And when I stripped it off, the Olympic White was still left under the pick guard, this type of area. When I stripped the Olympic White off, there was the SB for Sunburst here, and underneath it, just in this area, was a circle and it had Leo written on it. And the Sunburst had been crossed out. So he'd obviously walked down the factory, seen it, because the 2 bits of wood were an appalling match. Seen it, the match well on the back but not on the front. Leo had seen it, didn't want it Sunburst, crossed it out, and if you wanted to argue about it, you had to contact him because he signed it.
And out of all the guitars I've worked on, Fenders, I must have worked on 500 or 600 now. That's the only one I've had with his name on it. It's a good one, that. It's nice to see that he still walked down in '63. He still walked down the line and went, I don't like that. You know, he still cared, even then.
This is the Fuller Museum Center. It's home of the Leo Fender Gallery. Fullerton was Leo's hometown. He lived here until he died in 1991. You know, really by 1951, Leo was pretty thoroughly dissatisfied with the Telecaster because he was a perfectionist. And he saw right away, even before they went into manufacturing, he knew that he wanted to improve the Telecaster. So the Stratocaster was really an answer to the Telecaster. It was, how can I take, Leo's thinking to himself, how can I take all of the deficits of the Telecaster, all the areas that have maybe cut corners in the design, like the three-piece bridge and you know, the lack of contours and some of the improvements that he had thought of in his mind but he hadn't implemented yet in the Telecaster. Take all those ideas and build another Fender guitar that incorporated all the new ideas, as well as using the Fender way of making the guitar, which was, of course, the detachable neck, the hard rock maple neck, and the solid body. Modular construction where you have the components made separately, and then a final assembly all in one kind of fell swoop. You bring all the pieces together and put it all together, and you've got a guitar. It's kind of like simplified the manufacturing. So all those concepts went into the Stratocaster that had made the Telecaster great, went into the Strat with improvements.
And apparently the very first Telecasters were painted in furniture paint, but for a very short time. And then Fender moved along with the automotive industry, and they moved quite closely with that. The blondes started basically because blonde furniture was very prominent in the late 40s, early 50s. That's why he did the Telecasters in blonde. When they brought the Strat out, they wanted a slightly different look. You do see blonde ones, but they're rare from that period. Gibson were doing Sunburst, and Sunburst was popular with Gibson and some of the other colours, and I think that's why Fender brought the Strat out. Different shape body, lent itself quite well to a Sunburst, and I think that's why I went with Sunburst, because it was seen, from Leo's point of view, the Stratocaster was seen as a more upmarket guitar than what the Telecaster was. He thought when he brought the Stratocaster that nobody would ever buy a Telecaster again or an Esquire, and he was quite amazed when they did.
I think the Telecaster, although a great guitar, wasn't as varied for me as the Stratocaster was.
The thing about the Strat is that it's a great instrument the way it's designed. It has a sound, it has a feel, but it also can be personalized so easily. And in an example, you look at Eddie Van Halen, and he played a Strat style guitar. Stevie Ray Vaughan played a Strat. Totally different sound, but essentially it's the same body, the same neck, and it's that design that fits the human being. And it's like you become one with this piece of wood, or these two pieces of wood. And that's what's so beautiful about the design. I don't think there's any other guitar like that, where you pull the neck off and change that, pull the pickups out, change that. It's perfect.
Well, we knew we had to expand and provide a more modern type instrument, which it was. And I had the idea of naming these things such a way that they kind of fell in line with each other, whether it was the Telecaster, the Stratocaster, or whatever it might have been. At the time, there were things going on in the stratosphere and so on, and just came up with it, created the name.
I think over the years, vintage guitar market has built up a myth and legend of, like, they were made by little men in white coats with glasses and creating them out of special tone woods. They were basically made like any other factory, and they were done on a production line. There was a little bit of hand sanding done at the end of everything just to finish it off so it was nice. They were handled by hand as much as moving them from one machine to another unlike computer controlled routing that we have today. But it was basically people working in the factory who, if they weren't working at Fender or Gibson or any of the other guitar factories, they might have been working down in Detroit or somewhere like that, the motor industry. The automotive industry and Fender worked quite similar to one another in the mass production techniques and that, and the custom colours came basically from all the car colours. This is an original 61 to 63 Fender colour chart when they first came out, when they first started offering custom colours. Before that you picked your own colour and they went down to the local paint shop, got it mixed and sprayed your guitar that colour. But 61 to 63 you got the first colour charts out. They might have come out a little bit before that. This is quite a rare one because it's got shell pink at the bottom, which didn't last for very long. All the various colours, Sherwood green, seafoam green, surf green, which is a nice colour. In the late 50s, if you look at these charts, you can see where the colours came from, because American cars of the period were all running these type of colours, the pastels, even down to the pinks on some of the Cadillacs. I believe Elvis Presley had a pink Cadillac, probably a shell pink one because he liked Fenders.
Among Leo Fender's earliest endorsees was guitar virtuoso Buddy Merrill, a regular artist on the Lawrence Welk Show. Merrill, a pioneer home recordist, found the Stratocaster well suited to his pre-rock and roll playing style and multi-track recordings. Leo Fender gained valuable feedback from Merrill, who features prominently in Fender's early promotional catalogs.
Now that's what I like about Fender, because Fender used professional players in their testing rooms. That's why they're good. That's why the instruments were so... I fell in love with them. When I first brought the Stratocaster, my 54, to the band, they kind of joked with me about it, because I'd walk in there with my Stratocaster and they'd say, "Hey buddy, are you going to play your plank?" You know, because solid bodies of that type were not really come in yet, really. I think the Telecaster was the first, or the Esquire, right around there. That was the first solid body I'd ever seen, And I think the band never saw one either. So they had a lot of jokes for me on that account. I didn't meet Leo until I played my 54 Stratocaster for probably, it was probably August or September, right around there that I met Leo. It was quite interesting. He struck me as a scientist, like, he was quiet. He didn't say hello or greet you with a handshake or anything. He'd be looking down and he'd come over to you and says, "I want to show you some things we're working on." That was his introduction to me. What a great guy, man. So quiet. He was like a scientist, a real heavy, well, I imagine Einstein, at the time, and he never really, discussed anything but what they were working on. Oh, yeah, one of the guitars Leo made up for me was a powder blue Strad with a white pickguard and the toggle switch right about here. Well, this one sits there too. Would combine these two pickups, and it had such a wonderful, light, wispy sound. I used it a lot for rhythm because it almost took on a flat top sound, And I used that on my early albums because it sounded so much like a flat top that I just used it, and it would stay there. And it was the only guitar I had that would do that, This might even do it, I don't know. I was never into rock and roll too much, or any of that, and I know there's great players there in that style, But I never really got with that, I was always stuck back there somewhere, back in the 40s. Really, that's about it.
Buddy Merrill's image suited Fender's ideology. The earliest catalogs suggest that the company appeared to be targeting R&B, country, and Western swing players. It was the rock and rollers themselves who discovered Fender, as opposed to any market research by Don Randall and the Fender sales team. One of the earliest rock musicians to see the potential of the Stratocaster was Buddy Holly, who borrowed the money from his brother to buy what he reckoned to be the best instrument to fulfill his musical ambitions. Buddy's meteoric rise to fame, his iconic status and image with his sunburst 1955 Stratocaster, was the best endorsement that Fender could ever have hoped for. While early Strat endorsee wild surfer Dick Dale was virtually unknown in the UK, Buddy Holly was equally popular with American and British audiences and made the Strat the rock and rollers' axe of choice on both sides of the Atlantic.
But Buddy Holly found it early on. He was the first one. When I think back now, those early guitar players were an influence on me, but Buddy Holly actually really made those, I think made the Fender Fender's mark, whatever you call it, by writing those great songs and then playing so well. And just those wonderful, simple songs. But that guitar was a big feature in that 1956-57 period. And it really, I think, cemented Fender's sound, as it were. Buddy Holly had a friend, Bob Montgomery, who's now in the music business in Nashville, Tennessee. He was Buddy Holly's friend in Lubbock, and when I met them, they had a group, Buddy and Bob, would you believe it? A friend of mine moved from Meta, Texas up to Lubbock, Texas, about 30 miles away. He kept coming back down to Meta telling me about these guys that played bluegrass music, and I was a big bluegrass fan. And Buddy and Bob were both aware of me. They wanted to meet me, and of course I wanted to meet them. So one afternoon, I went with my friend Olin over to Bob Montgomery's house, and that's when I met Bob, and he said, boy, we got to go right over to Buddy's house and meet Buddy. So we got in the car and went over to Buddy's house and met him. It was March. I remember the day very well. It was March, and it was very windy, and sand was blowing. And by the time we got to Buddy's house, a little bit of rain had mixed in with the sand, and it's just one of those old bad spring West Texas days, you know. And we went inside and met Buddy, and he was a kind of a strange-looking creature at the time because he wasn't a fully grown guy. We were all about freshmen in high school. And he had dyed his hair, and he was a curly-headed guy, you know, and he had dyed his hair, and it was all growing out, and it was blonde on top, and it had these black roots, and he had these big horn-rimmed glasses, man. He looked about halfway from outer space, and he was really an interesting dude, and we didn't make any small talk or anything like that. We just said, hello, how you doing? We got our guitars out and went right to playing music immediately. Probably I saw Buddy get a lot more confident in himself and in his music, especially after we started playing rock and roll. Like I say, when Elvis came through town, we switched over to playing rock and roll. Rock and roll, you have to understand, was very, very popular because, well, mainly because of Elvis. And as we got more popular around the area, Buddy kind of grew in confidence, and also he got to be a better musician. He played better, and he played like I did. He played all the time, and he developed a real good technique, and his rhythm style was amazing. He was a real decent guy, and but he was a bit of a smart aleck too, and I mean that in only the best of terms. He was a bit, he had a mischievous personality. He really could stir things up, you know. But he was an exciting person, and fun to be around, and so that made him okay. He was very likable. He seemed to know that he was going to make it big, and that was that. I remember Norman Petty, who finally did record Buddy, and that's where Buddy sort of found his success, was through Norman Petty. Norman had a trio called the Norman Petty Trio. How's that? And Jack Vaughn, the guitar player, quit. Norman offered me the job, and Buddy, you know, asked me not to take it. I mean, I was really considering this job because there was some money involved, and that's something we weren't making much of, was money. I was really considering taking it, and Buddy said, "Man, don't take that job. That's not the kind of music you're going to like playing, you know." It was a real kind of cocktail music, like Honeysuckle Rose and Mood Indigo and those kind of things, you know, organ and piano and guitar. And Buddy said, "I don't think you're going to like playing that kind of music. Ben, you need to stick with us and play this rock and roll." And I said, "Yeah, man, but I can't do that because I'm not making any money." And he said, "Man, we're going to make it really big." And I said, "When do you expect we're going to do that?" He said, "Oh, it'll take us about as long as it took Elvis." I thought at the time that was sort of a, you know, a smart aleck remark, but that's about how long it took him, about how long it took Elvis. But he had a lot of vision. He was a real forward thinker. He was a real innovator. He wasn't afraid to do something new. You know, change the sound of his voice, do the hiccups and that sort of thing. He wasn't afraid to try something, and had a real aggressive nature about him.
Buddy Holly influenced a generation of rock musicians, both British and American, and raised the standing of the Fender Stratocaster to iconic status at an early period in the guitar's history. Virtually every quintessential rock giant today was at some point touched by Buddy Holly's music and image.
Yeah, I mean, ever since, I think it was the Chirping Crickets album, Buddy Holly, and they're all standing there with it like that, you know. And me and my friend used to just stare at the cover for about 3 hours every time we met up, you know. And we always wondered what this did and what that did, and didn't have a clue, really. My first electric guitar was an acoustic with a microphone stuck in it. And we used to sort of fool around where the mic went, and, you know, just what kids do in those days. And the thought of ever owning one was like way beyond us, you know. And then one day we were going along Charing Cross Road in a bus, not really looking at anything particular, and there was a white Strat hanging in the window of this, I think it was Macari's, before it was called Jennings then. We stop here, the bus wouldn't stop, so we jumped off, both nearly got run over. Ran across the road and went in there. I just went straight in like a water divining rod, you know. I didn't care about people or shopkeepers, I just went, "Can I have a look at that?" I goes, "Yeah." Immediately I picked it up, and that was the end of it. And I had to have one. I couldn't really figure out this though. We always thought it was much more complicated, you know, than my friends, and we had these guys looking around in there. One guy I knew went to a technical college, and he actually went into detailing this and trying to duplicate it to what he thought it was by putting spring weights on the end of each string and getting the tension and all that. And he said, "I got it sussed," and he thought each bridge moved individually, you know, and he made this incredible concoction, which didn't work at all. So when I found out this, you know, it was just one bar moving, one block, with, I think there's 6 springs on it in those days. It was just so, almost felt like there was a con there, you know. It should have been more than that, but there it is, it's simple and it works. And that's why it stayed around for so long, I think.
I wanted a Strat so badly that a couple of the guys were making them, older guys than me, were making them in woodwork class at school. And I used to go down to the woodwork shop and just so to watch them making their guitars, just so that I could maybe occasionally just be able to pick up the piece of wood. I was so in love with the shape, apart from anything else. And when you actually look at the shape, it's a really primeval, it's a beautiful, there's something really primitive and I think and special about it. And it's also sculpture because it's molded to to the player. It actually molds itself to your body really well, and it has this lovely profile here, I think, that going in there, and it's sexy, and it's functional.
There's something sexual about a Strat, you know, the way the body, even if you look at the body of the guitar, you know, it's a sexy looking guitar, and you want to pick it up and you want to hold it close to your body, you know, and then you want to play the shit out of it. And that's the beauty. I don't think there's any other guitar that I look at and have that kind of reaction to, you know. There's some cool looking guitars that are interesting, but nothing like that, you know. Just it becomes one with you.
And it combines the best of all possible worlds, and the size of the head and the shape of it suggestive of stuff to music and all good things.
This was reputedly one of Leo's designs. I believe it was one of his designs, because the earlier headstock, being this one, had a tendency to twist, but not on, this is a 62, and it was normally the late 50s when, if you look down the headstock, you can see it had started to twist a bit, and the idea, they started in late 63 where the headstock started to get fatter that way. Started to get a bit fatter. You see some that nearly come up to where it curves in on the tuner, where the tuner curves. Some of them even come right up to the curve, you know. And then in 66 they brought in the big headstock, presumably to stop the twisting. Although you don't see a lot of the small headstocks twisting, but by 59 and 60 they had got very thin front to back. And I have seen a few of them that have twisted. And I did have a 50s one, a mid-50s, that had a real twist on it. But that was the entire neck. And some of the really flamey necks have a tendency to twist. While flame's nice. Flame maple is a very nice wood to look at. This has a little bit of flame in it, but not a lot because somebody's varnished over it. Flame isn't a stable wood. And the furniture industry didn't want to use it. So the guitar industry used it instead. They wouldn't use it because it wasn't stable. That's why. So it was a cheap wood basically. Whereas once upon a time a big headstock was seen as being a bit, it's a big headstock, I want a little headstock. It's almost got a little bit the other way around now, because the big headstock is from its period in time, and it's got your Jimi Hendrix connections and all that. And people want a bigger headstock, you know, Richie Blackmore, people like that all use big headstock Strat. And that's why we've gone to that, really, you know. But it's still a nice looking headstock, particularly with like the Transition logo. When they went to the big black logo, even that has its place in time, I think. I think it's just an evolution of the guitar overall. It evolved slowly. Different people worked on it, and slowly it evolved, and they all have the place in time. I mean, personally, out of all Strats, I prefer the 50s ones, the maple and the ash. That's the Fender that I think is a classic Fender, is maple and ash. But I've played some really good 70s ones of maple and ash as well, you know. They all vary a little bit. They're all different. Some are brilliant, some aren't. Some are just regular, but they all vary. And they're a nice thing because of it.
They're like Ferraris, really. And they're not perfect, and not one of them's ever the same, which makes them even more romantically inclined towards the myth. And personally, this guitar's given me everything I've ever had.
Yeah, I started on acoustic guitar, just cheap little plywood-looking guitar with sunburst painted body, doing Lonnie Donegan type material, which was basically Woody Guthrie influenced stuff, and I also played some Leadbelly songs, but at the same time I was listening to the early rockers like Eddie Cochran, Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry. So I tried a few lead lines early on just to try and see if I could do it, but it was a good 2 years before I got into electric guitar, because it took me quite a while to learn all the standard songs like It Takes a Worried Man, Lost John, the Grand Coulee Dam, Rock Island Line, but eventually got a solid 7 Rossetti guitar, which was, I think they were made in Italy, and it was quite good. It was a very distorted guitar, which I didn't like at the time, because clean sounding guitars were the thing. So I reckon if I had it now, it might be quite usable as a sort of a Elmore James type guitar. And then when I was about, I don't know, 63 or something, this guitar came into the local music shop, Crowley's, and it had been owned by the guitar player of the Royal Show Band, and he actually wanted a red one like Hank Marvin, but the sunburst one came in instead, so he had to wait for 6 months to get a red one, and then he let this one go, and I saw it in the shop and I was knocked out, because it's the first Strat guitar I ever saw, and it was Buddy Holly's image and so on. So luckily I was able to get it and pay for it every week for I don't know how many years, and it's held up well since, and it's been through the wars, but I still like it a lot, you know. The Stratocaster looked really sort of futuristic when it came out on the Chirping Crickets album, plus Hank Marvin would have been a factor because he popularized the Strat in this part of the world. It just looked right, and the sound off a Strat, which was so chirpy and zingy, you know, appealed to me, you know.
Hearing those early rock and roll records, it was the sort of sounds that were to us in Britain very unusual, the twanging guitar sounds of people like Cliff Gallup with Gene Vincent, Scotty Moore with Presley, Buddy Holly, and I heard a little bit of Chet Atkins too. And those sounds were, to me, something quite wonderful that I wanted to try to emulate. And I then set about trying to work out how to emulate the sound. And at first I just didn't have a clue, because later on we found that some of those guys like James Burton were using lighter gauge strings for a start, which we didn't know about then. And also they had access in the studios to tape echo and things like this, which obviously in the back streets of Newcastle there wasn't a lot of tape echo. So they were some of the drawbacks I initially found, and of course the guitar I was using, which was basically an acoustic guitar with a pickup stuck on it, was no way going to sound like a proper electric guitar.
So what about that first electric guitar then, when you changed from the Hofner? Do you remember what that was?
Well, I borrowed one for a while. Here we go again, borrowing. Was an old Vega. This must have been quite an old guitar, because the pickup arrangement on it was had one pickup near the bridge, and over the pickup it had like a big horseshoe arrangement, a chromed horseshoe. But it sounded terrific. It had that twangy sound that the American guitars had, and I used that on the first tour with Cliff and for about the first 6 months. And then I bought an Abomination. It was made by Antoria, a Japanese company. And the reason I bought it was because it looked like a rock and roll guitar. It had a small, solid body. The headpiece here was, headstock was similar to a Fender, but much bigger and clumsier, with all the machine heads on one side. And I thought, wow, that looks something. So I think it cost me £35 and I was done. The neck was very chunky. The section through the back was very deep. It's the kind of guitar that Fred Flintstone may have come up with. And the neck was actually bent like a bow. It sort of came up, so if the viewer's looking here, it actually went like that and bowed up, which meant if you had a decent action about here, at the top, this section was about ½ an inch. So I tried to avoid playing around this area on the neck, which wasn't easy. I used that for about, 6 months. And we did some of Cliff's records on that. It had a very unusual sort of, usual out-of-phase sort of sound, and the strings used to click against the pickups, which was quite interesting. Then we moved on to the Stratocaster period.
This guitar is a April '59 Stratocaster that Cliff ordered from Santa Ana, California. Cliff and the Shads were listening to people like Ricky Nelson, obviously Buddy Holly, Gene Vincent, and we loved Ricky's records, for instance, Ricky Nelson. And we didn't know in early 1959, who the guitar player was. I mean, it later transpired, everyone knows it's James Burton, but we didn't know their names then because Ricky's records just said Ricky Nelson with instrumental accompaniment.
And we were looking for this sound. We wanted to get this twanging American sound, and it had to be an American guitar, we felt. Our heroes by then were Buddy Holly, and James Burton was coming through quite strong on the Ricky Nelson records. I loved his style of playing, and we heard that he played a Fender. So we decided the Fender was the way to go. Buddy Holly used one. Well, he was then dead, but had used one. James Burton. We got a brochure from the States, and we looked through this brochure, and it was kind of happy hours of browsing at all these instruments in there.
I remember Mark Knopfler saying that he can remember the smell of the brochure, never mind about anything else. And we're thumbing through the little brochure, and we came to the middle of the brochure, and this flamingo pink gold-plated maple neck Strat was in the centre. We said, Ricky Nelson's guitar player must play this one. It must be this one, you know. So Cliff ordered this one for Hank to play. And I think it was about 140 guineas in sort of April '59. So he sent off for it because you couldn't buy American instruments in shops then. It's very difficult to imagine now with all the huge stores selling equipment and stuff. You just couldn't buy them, couldn't get it. And so this thing arrived about May of 1959. And this thing arrived, the case, and, you know, even the case looked fantastic, you know, the old tweed case. And we opened the case. And I've always sort of said it was like, you know, the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when the ship comes over with the lights, and we just went, oh, you know. I mean, it was obviously brand new then, gold-plated, beautiful maple neck. Of course, I had the wobble arm on it, you know, which I don't use. And we were just stunned by the look.
We were so stunned, we almost didn't want to touch it, just look at it, you know, frightened to sort of play it in case it disappeared or something. But it was quite an amazing instrument, and of course we later found out that James Burton didn't use a Stratocaster at all. He used a battered old Telecaster with light gauge strings on.
And basically, when I went to work with Ricky, I started using banjo strings because I wanted, you know, to bend the regular guitar strings a little bit too stiff. So I got to thinking there's got to be an easier way. And I started using banjo strings at first, second, third, and fourth, and then I figured, well, you know, if I'm going to use that, then I've got to decide what to use for a fifth and E string, fifth and sixth. So I went to a regular D string for a guitar with the guitar string, and on the E string I went to a regular A string, and it worked out real even. And then I had my strings gauged and came out with 9, 10, 12, 24, 32, 38. And very even gauge. It stays in tune, believe it or not.
But nevertheless, this was one of the sequences of accidents which led up to me developing a sound which became a readily identifiable sound. So getting this guitar, Stratocaster with a tremolo arm, was the first step, really.
As soon as Cliff became famous, we managed to get Vox AC-15s from Vox for nothing. So we were chuffed a bit, you know. And it was the combination of this Fender Stratocaster and the Vox amp that gave Hank his sound with his Miazzi Echo Box, the Italian Echo Box. And the AC-15 we used at the Palladium, things like that on Sunday night at the Palladium. But when we used to work live, of course there was no PAs in those days. We didn't have huge rigs or anything. We used whatever was in the theatre, just a couple of mics, and we had no mics on our amps. We just set the amp on the stage and just had an internal balance between the front line. You know, no PAs, no mics. And of course the girls just screamed the bloody place down, so we couldn't hear anything. You'd be a bit like the Beatles years later at Shea Stadium, where they couldn't hear what they were playing because of the screaming, you know. And to cut a long story short, we had these AC-15s for a while, and then Hank went to a lovely man called Dick Denny, who was at Vox, and sort of, I wasn't actually there, but he said something like, "Can you make me one of these amps, but with more volume?" And Dick put the two AC-15s together, which created the AC-30. And that amp, you know, the AC-30, Hank's playing, and this guitar started the whole thing off, really.
What about Hank Marvin? Did you?
Yeah, oh, he was great. I mean, he actually helped us a lot because we were struggling trying to get a band together, and the stuff he plays was like, we had that down in a couple of hours, you know. And then we played Apache for about 3 years as our main number, and gradually we picked up a few more like Ventures, like. But it wasn't quite as melodic as old Hank, you know. It was just a great thing that he was so popular as instrumentalist in that time, you know, Apache and do-da-ding, what's that thing, FBI and all that. And the kids loved it, you know, so we just went into those numbers when we got into trouble at these gigs, you know, and I like that instrumental you did, sort of thing.
Probably the definitive sound for me will always be the Shads, you know, and I'm still on my mantelpiece at home. I've got this little EP, you know, with the four of them there, and the red Strat with the red Strat, you know. The early notes of a lot of those tunes, the first notes of Wonderful Land, the first notes of Atlantis, the first notes of Apache, you know, those where you get that major Strat twang. There's nothing quite like it, and it made a huge impression on me, I think, when I was a kid.
Well, we had the Vox amps at that time, the first AC-30s, and the Strat sounded really good through a Vox AC-30 because there's something about that Vox AC-30. It's got a kind of raw, middly sound, and it seemed to suit the Stratocaster. The Echo Box came along a little later. We were invited by Jack Good, that some of the viewers might remember, who produced the Oboe Show, and he went on to big things in America, but at that time he was producing the successor to the Oboe Show. I think it was Boy Meets Girl, and he did that in Manchester. Cliff and ourselves were appearing for a week in Liverpool, and we had a call from Jack that he'd like us to come across to Manchester and meet a hero of ours who was Gene Vincent, who'd just come over to do some work in Britain. So we shot over one day and we met Gene, and that was a thrill for us. But Joe Brown, who was a resident on the show, took me on one side and said, "I'd like to show you something. What do you think of this?" And he gave me his guitar, and he had this little green and brown or green and beige box on his amplifier with a few knobs on the front, and I played the guitar through it, and there's all these amazing echo sounds came out. And I thought, that's fantastic. It's like being in a recording studio. And he didn't like it. Joe liked the very dry sound, and I've always said to Joe that his guitar sounds like a plank of wood, you know, it's got no sustain, donk, donk, and we have a bit of a laugh over that sometimes. But I liked this sound because I could see the possibility of it, to get a recorded guitar sound live on stage. So when I got back to London, I contacted Jennings, who are then the importers, and they kindly allowed me to have one, to try one, and I thought it was absolutely tremendous. So immediately that became part of the sound. So the guitar with the tremolo arm, so I developed a technique whereby it's quite popular now with light gauge strings for people to do finger vibratos, you know, when they're playing. But then we had very heavy gauge strings on it, and it was impossible to do that, really. Not that anyone had thought of it anyway in Britain, and we hadn't heard anyone play like that. But I didn't like the sound of a guitar when a note just rings like this. It seems to me uninteresting. You know, human voice usually has a vibrato. Most natural things seem to have vibratos, and other instruments, trumpets, violins. And I found with this tremolo, if I held it in my hand when I was playing, I could, you know, get some kind of expression. So that was a technique I developed, and this tremolo arm, the guitar, the amplifier, and the echo box, over a period of only, I guess, probably 3 months or so, 2 to 3 months, that sound had arrived that I wasn't particularly, I couldn't take any credit for it in the sense that it wasn't something like a grand plan, it was a series of accidents. Put them all together and we had a sound that people were now talking about, and I didn't think too much of it at the time, you know, because to me it was just the way it sounded. I was trying to sound like Scotty Moore and Cliff Gallup, you know, I wasn't trying to get this new sound going. But I think the heavy strings, the tremolo arm, of course, and I guess just the way I played the guitar, failing in a way to sound like those guys, ended up with a distinctive style, which was terrific. I'll be eternally grateful.
But this is special because of its history, you know. It's history. It's just what it did and what records it's been on. And I think, you know, when you read about Hendrix's guitars going for astronomical money, and Jimmy didn't, see, people like Jimmy or Mark Knopfler, they never had one special guitar. They, you know, you go and see Jimmy or Mark, they've got 28 guitars on the side of the stage, you know. So the ones that went for huge money, like Hendrix's, the one from Woodstock, because people have seen him playing it at Woodstock. But this was like you know, this was loved, this was cherished, it was, and still is. And I guess it's worth a few quid.
There's a lot of myth about vintage guitars. What makes a good guitar is whether this bit works well with that bit, and if them two bits work well together, then it gets you a really good guitar. If the, shall we say, the sound vibrations are going the opposite ways on the body and the neck, then you get a mediocre guitar. If they go the same way, then you get a good guitar or an outstanding guitar. And that's really all it boils down to, the components. If all them components work well together, then you've got a great guitar.
Over the years we kind of clocked up a lot of, I don't know how many 100 gigs, and this neck, you know, it just absorbed so much sweat and wear and tear that it was just playing up a little bit. So somebody advised me to take it off the body and hang it up in a kind of a dry, warm room for about 6 months. So I put a replacement neck on for a while, and then after 6 months I stuck the original back on, and it felt better, and it kept more in tune. And but I kind of missed it while it was off the guitar, because it's the neck is a vital part of the sound. People think the body is the important thing, and it's not really. If you put a bad neck on a good body, the guitar will sound bad. Whereas if you put a good neck on an average or even a poor body, it'll work, you know. I don't know why that is, but it's just something to do with the makeup, or wherever the resonance is, or whatever it is, you know. Plus the metal bar down through the neck, you know, that's probably where the sound starts and moves down, you know. But that's all science. I don't understand any of the reasons why, you know.
For some strange reason, this body is a little bit lighter than most 62s, which I think is why it doesn't sound as hard. It has been in a flood where it lost most of its paintwork, and I think it got a lot of water in it, and when it dried out, it was different, but I loved it, and it's completely irreplaceable to me. You know, I'd rather my house burnt down. You know, you can cars, anything, any car. As long as I've got this guitar, you can have everything else, even all the other Strats. Yeah, this is, just to be Middlesbrough about it, I'd be buggered without it.
Our first tour of the United States was in 1960. It was in the winter, January, February, and it was blooming cold. We visited a lot of the Midwestern places when the temperatures are decidedly sub-zero. But Apart from the thrill of going to America, one of the greatest thrills for us was actually to get down into Texas and play a concert in the hometown of Buddy Holly, which is Lubbock. And there we met his father and some guys who had sung on the early Crickets records on the backing vocals. And that was a real thrill to be there in the place and meet his father and hear a few little words mentioned about the early records, how they were made and so forth. So that was quite a thrill because Buddy was a big hero of ours, and he just had something about his music which I think the fact it's lived on and so many people are still influenced by it shows how simple it was but tremendously effective. And of course it was nice for someone like me who wore glasses to see that someone who wore glasses could actually become famous. Because it's quite an amusing story. Back in 1959, early 1959 in fact, Cliff and ourselves did a week at the Finsbury Park Empire. And on the show was a guy called Johnny Duncan, American country and western singer who had a big skiffle hit at the time. And his guitarist, he said, look, Hank, he said, can I give you a tip to help you? I said, sure, you know, I mean, you're a very experienced musician, great. He said, it's about your glasses. He said, do yourself a favor and don't wear your glasses on stage. He said, you don't do that in show business. You don't wear glasses on stage. He said, look at our drummer, Lenny Hastings. He said, he's blind as a bat. He said, he doesn't wear them on stage. I said, but I've got to. I said, I would just fall off the stage or something. He says, it doesn't matter. Fall off the stage, but don't wear your glasses. I'm glad I didn't listen to him because it became a kind of trademark appearance, which is good, you know, and it gave a lot of hope to other kids with pimples and glasses.
I think he had a huge influence, and it was great really for guys who wore glasses, because instead all the idols were like Cliff or like Elvis or maybe even me, but you know, it was great that he wore glasses because although Holly had done it and he probably was influenced by Holly, it nevertheless made it more, I don't know, more of a natural thing. You know, the kids were seeing this guy playing all these great riffs, but on top of that, man, he had a guitar that, you know, made the world dance. You know, it was possibly the greatest guitar of all time.
There's an interesting tale, isn't there, about when you visited the States and some people from the Fender factory saw you?
Oh yeah, they thought I was down at heel and I couldn't afford a good, nice, clean guitar, and they were slightly embarrassed by the finish. So they gave me a white, lovely white anniversary Strat, which I used in the studios a lot, because it's a great sound. But the odd thing is nowadays people aren't too offended by the look of these guitars, because Adrian Belew has this battered looking one, and the late Stevie Ray Vaughan had a Sunburst Strat with all the finish gone. So, and somebody told me that in Japan they do Strat copies now with this finish, which is really taking the thing too far. But it was very, very nice of them to give me the white Strat. But it's I must play it on stage now, but it's beginning to lose some of the finish, the white shine. So I've christened it now, so I can bring it on stage, you know.
LA doo-wop. That's really what appealed to me. And they didn't use guitars at all, interestingly enough, or very, very much in the background as a rhythm instrument. The harmonies really attracted me. Elvis, of course, came along about that time, and his lead guitarist was a master. Bill Haley and Elvis, actually, when I think about it. Bill came along first with his wonderful band. His guitar player was just phenomenal. He deserves all the credit in the world for getting me going. When we recorded our first song called Surfin', none of us had instruments that we owned outright, other than I think Carl Wilson, I think, owned a hollow body electric. But again, he played it more like as an, just an accompaniment piece. And he was learning the Chuck Berry riffs from a next door neighbor. Our music was limited at that time to a 4-piece, really a combo. So, and we were primarily a vocal band, vocal group, ensemble, whatever. So the range of the guitar really wasn't explored very deeply, but it was a beginning for us. After that song became mildly successful, I think Brian, it might have been Brian, must have been Brian or Carl, suggested electric, going electric, all electric, because we had only my stand-up bass, which I rented from down the street at a music house, and Carl's guitar, and Brian wasn't really playing piano at the time. as much as just being more in charge of, you know, production and singing and arranging. But we weren't playing the piano yet on recordings. So the guitars were very important, the guitar sound. And I think Carl influenced our going to Fender. Ironically, we had to buy the equipment because we weren't yet established. So there was quite an investment to be made there. And they were great instruments and wonderful gear, and it was all the rage. They developed the sound of the Beach Boys really in the early 60s. We had the Fender P bass, precision bass, and the Stratocasters and the Telecasters, and the Jaguar, and you know, all these wonderful guitars to work with. And that really became our trademark sound. And of course we adopted the white Strat to go with the white pants and striped shirts, you know, blue and white, red and white, whatever it was, I think black and white, thin stripes, white stripes. We actually stole the idea from the Kingston Trio and modified that look to become the Beach Boys image for quite a while. Songwriting involves influences from your environment. So being from the state of California, being so sunny and wonderful and close to the ocean, if not on the ocean, it's inevitable you write songs that make you happy. At least that's what we did. And Dennis Wilson was a big, you know, water person. He loves surfing, and so he brought a lot of the stories home to us. And he tried to teach me to surf, but I sank like a stone. But I still enjoy the myth. You know, it's really what it is. The idea is really stronger than the thing itself. You know, it's just, if you're sitting out in the water on a surfboard, looking at the landmass called California, or even an island somewhere, you know, Hawaii, it's just a wonderful feeling, you know. And you're really in touch with nature and with the environment. And so our songs tend to reflect that, I think. And it probably influences a lot of people. Of course, also the songs are enlightening and fun, you know, like, you know, they were the early party songs. Anyone could sing a Beach Boy song. I mean, a melody anyway, maybe not the harmonies, but, you know, it's just fun to be able to hear a good, you know, nice little, you know, 3-minute song about your favorite sport, or your favorite car, or your favorite, you know, girlfriend, you know. And the guitars were a real important part of that. Carl was always the lead guitar. He excelled at that, and he was probably the only one that took lessons. The rest of us were just hacks, you know, just playing along with, and you know, wherever it went, we went. We took it. If Brian had an angle, we went there. Carl would support that. I would support him. Dennis learned to play drums. He just had to learn, otherwise, that was it. I mean, what would he do? So we needed a drummer. He learned to play drums. Brian is a very adaptable songwriter. Extremely brilliant. Maybe that's a better term. He just knew how to put together a wonderful, he would call them pocket symphonies. I think he's used that term to describe them.
One of my big ambitions was to go to Disneyland and also the Fender factory, because they were on the same, you know, the Fullerton Way, was it? And never made the Fender factory, and we got thrown out of Disneyland, so it was a pretty miserable trip. But then I heard that Leo Fender hated the English invasion, the British invasion. Somebody told me, you know, you get these crackpots and stuff. And I just thought, And looking at the Fender catalogue of the day, it was all names that I'd never heard of, except for James Burton. I think he was in there. But a lot of, like Homer and Jethro, and strange acts that I would love to have heard but never got the chance. I thought, okay, it's a closed shop, that's it, but I love his guitars. And then it goes on, and then Hendrix, you know, of course, kind of, he was synonymous with Fender Strat. You know, people that never noticed guitars were starting to notice this white thing he had around his neck, round the wrong way, and it just looked awkward, and just went along with his whole image thing. And I remember even then noticing, you know, look at how great he looked with white Strat round the wrong way. You know? So that really would send the thing, I think, skyrocketing, you know, in popularity. And by using Marshalls, the way he had them set up was really like, he had the best of both worlds. You know, like really tough low end and screaming high end, but everything all in between as well. I mean, just great education to all of us, really, that was.
Absolutely. Now, the thing about Hendrix, though, is I believe that Jimi Hendrix played a left-handed guitar, but he actually had it strung the proper way. Now, he did play like this as well, too, but he did restring it the other way. So that, honestly, we do play left-handed, but mine is actually restrung completely upside down. So that's one thing that's the difference. But what I love about Hendrix is, my God, the man's fingers are just so long, and the chords that he's doing is just like crazy. But the sound, to take R&B urban music and to mix in the rock flair, and then just to bring in tones that people weren't accustomed to just bring something so innovative and so different, and not only just the guitar, but just the looks of that, an African-American man with just the hair and the different, the women's type clothes, and you can see that now on different people like Lenny and Van Hunt and Prince, obviously. It's just so incredible, and he's so innovative, I feel. Just the licks that he was doing is just, it's incredible.
Well, I guess Jimi Hendrix was, as a kid, you know, the first person I saw with a Strat.
I think probably the most important start of my rewinding and making pickups was having a chance to work with Jimi Hendrix, doing Strat pickups for him for Roger Mayer. And he was playing in Cincinnati, Ohio back in 1968, and he had the Soft Machine on tour with him. And the neat experience I had with him is being backstage with him, and he was showing me how, you know, you bang on the guitar and then you bring the tremolo down, and then he was plucking on the strings in the back, and he was like, listen to that. Because when you pluck on the spring, it was very close proximity underneath where the pickups are here. And I saw him notching the actual, because we didn't have 5-way switches back in 1968. And so the neat thing about him is he was always very experimental. You know, he would hit a note, then do the dive bombs. He was the first guy I heard really doing it, you know.
I mean, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic, but it was used in a different way. I mean, it's like he used it like to detune and for effects, you know, all that kind of thing like that. Besides that, he was Jimi Hendrix. There's no way in the world anybody else is going to be a Jimi Hendrix, so I let that be.
Oh, it was just a complete freak out, really. You know, I mean, Jimmy always reckoned he was from Venus or outer space. He definitely was. He frightened the life out of everyone because he was just on his own. He was so different. But the thing about Jimmy that I love more than anything, you know, is his songwriting skills. You know, his songs have a tremendous transcendental beauty, which I love. You know, as much as I love guitar players, I love songwriters even more. And whereas, you know, Jimmy did freak me out with what he did with the guitar, especially something like the Star Spangled Banner, which no one had ever heard anybody do before. And when I got a Strat, that was the first thing I tried to play, because I just thought, oh, I can make a hell of a noise. I can just feedback and make a noise. And it was so much fun learning how to control the feedback. And Jimmy was the guy that really got everybody into that, to use the guitar, to be a sonic architect. That is the thing, you know, he's a sonic architect. And that is the one thing that I loved about, you know, Jimmy's playing, is the fact that there were no limits. You know, he didn't really see any boundaries. He just went wherever his head told him he could go. And you know, that and his songwriting for me was the thing that turned me on most about him.
It was like a sort of invisible force saying, "Thou shalt continue, and thou shalt not be a bus driver, you know, or a plasterer, or a car painter, you know." And he did all the things that I wish I had the balls to do, you know, which was hours of feedback and just having a ball with this thing. And because of the way he put it over, he got away with it. But it wasn't easy for me to sort of get back on my rails, so to speak, you know. I was playing very much more subdued blues rock. And I was in this little band called the Tridents. And we were just about to break into the Hendrixy stuff, which was long, free-form guitar solos. And we started pulling quite a few people down at Eel Pie, 900 people, after a miserable sort of 250 every second week in the month, I think it was. We started, "You got to go and see that guitar player," you know. And then I realised I'd done something right, you know. And it was like the telly, which I used to detune and pull the low string across the pickup, and smack the high string across the pickup, and it would make you know, these ridiculous noises, you know. And everybody went, "Yeah, I love that." But that was way before Hendrix. That was 63, 64, I think it was. Then he came out with, you know, and that was my kind of music. So yeah, then everybody was Jimi Hendrix this, Jimi Hendrix that, and I just, even though he gave me a charge to carry on, it was very difficult to get people to believe what you were doing, you know. I think a lot of people would bear that one out. You know, just an animal. It was mind-blowing meeting him as well, and hearing that he was into our stuff, the Yardbird stuff. He used to know everything, knew it all backwards. You know, all that shapes of things. He couldn't play the solo, you know that? Yeah, no. He didn't have that down. And he couldn't play with a bottleneck either. I showed him a few things on that. He never really got round to bottleneck. I don't recall he played much. Did a few of these and a few of those. So I had that up on him, and we used to meet a lot and chat. And he was quite intense about his music, passionate.
The first sound of the Strat, really, that probably drew me in is when you play with a pick and your vibrato comes from the tremolo arm. It doesn't come from your hand on the... It's not like when you see me playing it, often you'll see me playing with a vibrato on the neck like that. But when to play this way, I play this guitar this way, I don't put any tremolo on. I don't put any tremolo on the neck, and I use the tremolo here, so it's like that. Something like this. Or whatever it is. But it was just that lovely tonality and the sound. And these old things are just tremendous because I think that the pickups become more microphonic, you know, as the years go by. It kind of all dries out and it just gets delicious. And I like to use really heavy strings on this old bird. It just picks up the noise a little bit better. But that's the sound that I initially fell in love with, you know that. It's all good tone. And so you actually, the vibrato's coming from the trem, and I love playing like that. You know, to me that's in a lot of ways that's the beginnings of how the sound originally grabbed me before I was old enough to really get into the blues and all of that sort of thing. And then of course later on, you know, I realized that as I got into my teens and I got really absolutely stuck on the Chicago blues and everything else. And then I realized how versatile the Strat is, what a great rocking machine it is, you know, and it really will. It's got load and load of welly. So it really sings. And it's got edge, it's got body, and it's got tone and everything. So you can really drum up a lot of thunder with it, as well as be quite delicate, you know. And, you know, with the right, let's see if I put this through another kind of amp, get quite a contrasting thing. You get a nice clear sound. With this one, it's got an old 3-part switch. It's a 1961 one, the old Sultans of Swinger, And what you do is you learn to, before they invented 5-way switches, somebody found out if you jammed the little switch between positions, you got this out of phase thing happening between these two pickups, and you got a nice clear kind of sound with a bit of texture to it, you know.
You have the combination of the 3 different pickups. Nowadays you have a 5-way switch, which most of the guys use, but it allows you to go into the 2 position, which allows you to use 2 pickups here in parallel with each other. Then you have your single in the middle, and then you come to the 4 position, and then you have these 2 in parallel. And then like Eric Johnson, he'll have the tone control, instead of on the neck pickup, he'll actually have it on the bridge pickup, so he can control the tone of the bridge pickup, and he gets his unique tone from it, you know, when he plays on the bridge with it.
I remember Carl telling me, I always put it on the second switch up, and I had no idea what that meant, but I always put it on the, you know, not in the middle, just next one down, and crank them all up, all the way to 10. This one has 11 on it, by the way, and then you just get all your sounds on the amp, and the biggest nemesis for us to kind of make and it's kind of a funny thing, was the reverb box before it became built into the amplifier itself. There was a separate box for reverb, and the darn thing was always going off on you when you least expected it. All you had to do was hit it, just tap it with something, and it would explode out of the amplifier, and we'd all jump and wonder what the heck happened. And they finally got smart. And now if you have a twin, and you might drop it, you'd hear it. You might hear it go off for a minute, but it was never as loud as that little remote box. And you'd have to set it up in your amp and get the right amount of reverb. But it was a terror, especially when Dennis would he hit the drum real hard, and that would set it off.
I got hung up on this thing, and when I realised the potential of it, it started to determine more or less my style. So I just couldn't go back to a non-vibrato arm guitar, and this one, as I say, is really resilient. It's just stood the battering that I gave it over the years.
I use it all the time, you know, sometimes, you know, if you're really aggressive with it, you know, it'll go out, but it's easy to get back in tune. You know, for me, I just kind of tug on the strings a little bit and bring them back, and it's a great expression. And I prefer this kind of tremolo system because I do a lot of things too, where I'll bend behind the nut, you know. So you know, you can't do that with a different kind of tremolo system. So it's just another extension of expression on the guitar.
The signature model came about, I think it was maybe about '89 or so when I was approached by John Grunder back then at Fender, and he mentioned maybe doing a Robert Cray model. And so we talked about it, and I also have a 58 Strat, which is the one that's pictured on the cover of Strong Persuader, similar to this. And the 64, we took those 2 particular models, and what I wanted was a combination for the feel of the neck between those 2. The 58 had a maple neck like this one, and of course the 64 had a rosewood neck, but I wanted the same kind of radius, you know, kind of a combination radius of the 2. And I wanted my colors. and I wanted to stop tailpiece because I don't use a whammy bar. I just wanted the strings to come through, and we were going to experiment with pickups, which we did, and we finally settled on custom shop pickups, that was basically it. We tried to run. I had an experimental model which I still have. I've replaced the neck on it since then, but it was the pickups on that one were really, really strong, so we settled for something a little less powerful on this particular model, and it's perfect. I play those all the time on stage.
Great sound. Cool.
Special pickups, or do they sound really quite punchy?
Yeah, Texas specials. Yeah, I think they. I mean, they suited me in terms of, well, I just got a bunch of them and all just tried them out. I got a bunch of different bodies, tried them out, different materials, and I think it's about the best neck they do. And I like these big smooth jumbo frets that they just suit me, and it works. Yeah, Strats, eh? Can't beat them.
I made a switch in the early 90s to Fender. I had another company designing guitars that were basically Fender copies. And I was making a record, and Fender had come to the studio, and they gave me 2 guitars. They gave me a Strat and a Telecaster, both custom shop guitars. And the Tobacco Telecaster they gave me, that was it. That was my guitar. That became my main guitar that I played all the time on everything. And after a while, they had approached me and said, listen, people are kind of identifying you with this Telecaster. We'd like to do a model, a signature model. Is there anything you'd like to do to change it? So we started talking about how to change the guitar. And one thing I liked about the Strat is the comfort cuts, in the body. So I added that to my Telecaster. Until that point, I hadn't seen a Telecaster with the comfort cuts. So we added that. And we also added a drop D tuner, which is kind of cool. A lot of the heavier stuff that I do, I'll drop down to a low D. And for live, it's like a bass player. Mostly they have it, but on my tellies, I just have that drop D, and it's all set. And also the necks, I got fairly big hands for my size, so I like a fatter neck with bigger frets. And those were kind of the key items that we customized, as well as we took off the tone knob and made a series parallel switch for the middle position. So that Telecaster is a pretty unique guitar, and that's the main guitar that I play. And then I have a Strat too, which I'm holding now. And at the same time that we did the Telly, they wanted to do a Strat model as well. And I was playing a white Strat back then when I wasn't playing the Telly. And so we kind of went the same road, we did some custom pickups and the custom neck dimensions and the frets. And this is it, it's my signature model Strat.
Well, this is a combination of Beck, is it down there? Dan, who is it down at Fender? Dan Smith. And he brought me this yellow, canary yellow one, and that broke my heart straight away. I had to have that. And then he started saying, well, how do you want it? How do you want it? We'll make it how you want it. I said, well, you're asking me how you... I mean, I've been playing your guitars quite happily since 1959, 60. And I've loved every one of them, And you're asking me how you want it? If you're asking me how I set mine up, then yeah, all right. And the one I used at the time was a fat neck, a fairly fat neck. But this was partly an overhang from the Les Paul because that had a fat neck. So I didn't want to feel too alienated from the Strat by playing these skinny necks. And then I tried playing skinny neck. And there's certain things you can do on it, but my hand is strange. It's got a great void behind the neck, and I need that support, otherwise it aches like mad right up this after an hour or so. So they gave me about, I don't know how many dozen. They seem to come every day with the postman, these guitars. And they were all great, and I just had to dial into one particular one and play it for a while, and this is the one. And it sounds pretty good.
But I still play a 62, which is, by the way, being cast and molded and whatever, every little scratch and nook and cranny, to be made into a signature guitar. It's really stock. There's nothing really different about it. I mean, it hasn't been modified in any way. So it is what it is, and it sounds pure and good. And I have been tempted to increase to put some different pickups in there and, give it a little bit more boost, but I didn't think that would be right.
I picked up the 58. I picked it up, I'm trying to remember exactly when. It was in the 80s. I got a really good deal on it. The guy says, you better get this because Stevie Ray Vaughan's coming into the shop a little bit later on this afternoon. That hit my ego, so I bought it. And so I still have that one. I also picked up a 65 Strat, a white one with the tortoiseshell pickguard. And that one is in need of some repair as well. And after that, just an assortment of different ones that I've, picked up from the custom shop. And like I said, I play the custom shop ones quite a bit. And then also there's the Mexican Strats, the Robert Cray Mexican model now, that also has the custom shop pickup in them as well. My guitars are pretty, they're set up pretty basically. I don't use the tremolo, floating tremolo, and I use an 11, 13, 18, 26, 36, 46, and it's kind of a medium gauge string, I suppose, and Fender Super Reverbs are a great amplifier, and I have a few of those lying around. But on stage, I use a combination of different amplifiers. I use a couple of matchless amplifiers, but then I also use the new Vibro King 310, which I love quite a bit. So I switch between those two amps.
My guitar setup, I like the action low, as low as I can get it without the strings buzzing. But for my style of guitar player, I use heavier strings than most guys that play the way I play. And I'm using 11 through 49, which I think for a rock guy, that's most guys I think are playing 9s. So, but that also has a lot to do with the sound. And I've been playing the 11 gauge so long that if I do go back to a lighter gauge, it feels weird, So I've kind of adapted to that.
Too quick. My friends think I look like a nervous man. The last night or two, it don't take so much. The feel I wanna raise the sand. It's one of those days. Disconnected, never really had a home.
know, they've done very good things with the new designs and the new finishes. I still, for myself, I prefer the old style. I don't even use the tremolo block. I've got this blocked up at the back. Whereas on the Anniversary Strat, I have used the tremolo arm a little bit in the studio by taking 2 springs off the 5 in the back. It gives you a bit more leeway. But the older tremolo units weren't that accurate, whereas the new ones on your average standard Strat are quite good. And I prefer them to say than the ones that are very floppy, like, you know, the Floyd Rhodes or Kahler. Those, they're very good for the Eddie Van Halen style. But I think I like a tremolo arm that's not too easy. You know, there's a little give in it, but not too much. You know.
But you can create those kind of effects without the arm. You have a way.
Well, it's all down to your fingers, really. But you can also use the back, you know, behind the nut type tricks. But you have to be in full flight to do that, really. But you really can't get all 6 strings to go up and down. But you can get 2. You know. Common or garden things that everyone does, but the trouble if you use tremolo, it can be overused, and like a lot of metal bands, the guitar players tend to use it in every song, and it becomes overdone. Hendrix just about had the right balance. I mean, he would use it a lot, but it worked. He used to make his guitar sound like it was going backwards on tape, you know, and he seemed to have it just about right, but I think it's overdone now, to be honest with you. You know.
You still like the idea of the springs in the cavity? Do you feel that gives a sort of built-in reverb effect?
It does, yeah, because I had another Strat that just had a bridge piece without the metal block in the back, and so on. So, and it didn't sustain as long, and it didn't have that ultra zing. So I mean, even though I'm not using this metal stuff, it does help the guitar to sound crisp and bright, you know. It's strange, you know. And say on a Telecaster that doesn't have all the metal block and so on, it has a sustain of a different kind. It's a lighter sustain, you know. So there's a good reason for leaving it there, really, you know.
What do you think makes the Fender Stratocaster so special for you?
Well, it's just the versatility. I mean, also you've got 3 pickups, but you have the in-between positions, which are used a lot by people. The tone control is really near your hand. The volume control the guitar stays alive as it goes down, whereas in some guitars, if you turn your volume from down, you see this is still happening as it goes down. Whereas on some guitars, when you take it below 8, the guitar starts getting very dead and unresponsive, you know. So that's another plus. Plus the scale of the guitar, you know, your hand feels right on the E chord, and it's just obviously a perfect design for some people anyway. And plus the controls really are very important to have. If I had 2 volumes and 2 tones, I'd get confused. And any time I jam or play on that type of guitar, I end up turning the guitar off by mistake because I get confused. So I just like the 1 volume and 1 tone. But it's the sound of a Strat, really. When all is said and done, that's the main feature, really.
mean, what this pickup is here is a replica of a Bigsby pickup that's made the same way Bigsby made his by Paul Warnick in Chicago for me. Because I said, look, the greatest sound in a bridge pickup I ever heard was a Bigsby steel guitar. There's nothing like it. It's in a class all by itself. And Paul is an expert in Bigsby's, and he knows what it consists of, what the wiring is, what the construction means, the metal that's used. Talk about mythology. And so he made this, and I put it there, and there it is. As much as you can say, given the difference in the mass. I mean, a Bigsby guitar is a huge thing, weighs 100 pounds or something. It's tremendously massive wood, metal, whereas this is like a sliver compared. But still, this thing has this very interesting top end, beautiful, plus with the good Gaia tone up here, then the two together, and it's remarkable. And so I love the flat guitars. I just can't seem to get comfortable with them, you know. You sit at them, like at a piano or a typewriter, and I can't do it. My feeling won't extend out to the machine. I've tried to play lap steels by holding them. That I can do. It's awkward, of course, but you can do it. I got to hang on to the thing.
At the heart of the Stratocaster's success are the 3 single-coil pickups, which individually and in combination provide the guitar's tonal range and unique sounds. Seymour Duncan has analyzed Leo's pickups and is able to replicate those pre-CBS sounds. Seymour's factory at Santa Barbara supplies pickups for some of Fender's top models. A pickup hand-wound by the guru himself is the ultimate Stratocaster accessory.
Well, I was very hungry for information. You know, I would call Leo on the telephone and talk to him. I used to write letters to Bill Carson at Fender back in the early 60s. I was writing, trying to find out when instruments were made, how this was done. I've had Bill Carson explain to me even how they did the magnets with a little wooden stick. They put the magnets in it and just turn it by hand, and that's how they would put the chamfer on it. And then the waxing, and then we use a vacuum system which pulls the air bubbles out of a pickup, which we can do it a lot faster. But I very much tried to emulate what Leo was doing. I looked at all his habits and how things were made, how the flat work was put on so you get a certain ring around each pole piece, and I paid close attention to that, you know, winding. I would take pickups, take each turn off one turn at a time to find out how many turns were put on. And the little thing, they were all different. The counters that they were using on the machines, it was connected to the motor with a rubber band. And the rubber band would slip sometimes, so, you know, you could have a book that would tell you the number of turns, but when you actually took the pickup apart, you would find it was actually different. You know, they weren't really standard on that. They would wind it to fill up the bobbin, basically.
I think in the early days when the girls were winding pickups by hand, you know, you'd get them, they'd be winding, they'd be talking about what happened last night, and some occasionally you might get a little bit more of a more of a wind on something. It would be more of an individual sound. And my old 54 Telecaster's got a pickup on the back like a hamburger because it must have been a good story. And there's a lot of winding going on. He did what?
And they would put black string or white string, and they put it in black wax to show that it was wax potted, and that would help reduce moisture from getting inside the coil, which would later keep microphonics down, and also would keep moisture from getting in and making the pole piece rust. So I've always watched what Leo was doing, and you know, I would go down to the Fender factory and I would just look, you know, just look and learn and ask a lot of questions. When we would do the NAMM show, which is the big music trade show that we have every January, I would ask all the Fender guys, you know, all about it, you know, And so I learned as much as I could, but just by doing it and by habit, and after a while. And then I had been winding recently with Abigail Ibarra, who worked with Leo back in the early days and stuff. So we sat side by side at the Fender 60th anniversary show that we did over in Scottsdale, Arizona, to sit there with a piece of history and see her machine and my machine next to hers, you know. So it was fascinating. But Leo was very important, and Doc Hoffman, who worked previously with Leo, talking to him, and you know, I was always hungry for information, and I would ask a lot of questions, and very proud of what I've done over the years with the manufacturing.
Guitars have a certain acoustic timbre to them, and sometimes it can range from the bright and even the extreme bright to where it sounds kind of harsh and hard up in the upper mid-range and treble tones, or conversely it can sound very warm, and taken to the extreme it can sound muddy. And this is really the types of woods and hardware that are used on the guitar. And sometimes the timbre of the instrument can be polarized, either towards the bright end or the warm end. By using pickups, we can balance that tone and bring it into more of a center or a moderate tone. For instance, if a guitar is polarized towards the bright sound, we can soften up that brightness by using a pickup with an Alnico 2 magnet, which is a softer magnetic field with kind of softer attack on the note. And by the same token, if a guitar is too warm sounding, we can add brightness into it by using a pickup with an Alnico 5 magnet. That'll sharpen up the attack and balance that guitar a little bit more. Also, you might want a pickup with more output, so that, for instance, when you click into the bridge position on the guitar and you want to take your big solo, you get an output push that's going to really make your solo stand out above the mix or above the other instruments that are playing. So one aspect of why somebody would change pickups is to enhance the sound of their guitar. But there's another part of it that's equally important, and it's selling the dream. And that's one of the things we do at Seymour Duncan. In addition to providing a product, we provide a dream. And that dream is that you're going to play better, you're going to sound better. I mean, it's wonderful when we hear stories from customers who install a Seymour Duncan pickup in their guitar, and then they tell us, you know what? I never knew that guitar could play that well. Now I'm playing new songs that I never played before. I've got inspiration to try new styles of music, and when that happens, they're living the dream. And frankly, that's the dream for us too, to help players sound better.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to load this bobbin up, and this is called hand winding. I call it scatter winding because I'm actually putting the magnet wire on at a random layering. And when you hand wind, which I'm going to be doing here, I actually predetermine how I want to wind it. I can control the shape, I can control the number of turns per layer, and I can control the number of layers. And I like hand winding because it's the real traditional way that the ladies at Fender wound their pickups. Their machine is somewhat similar to this. It has a counter, it has the actual rotator that spins the bobbin. I use a single light over it because I can control the shadowing and I can control the light. I usually use my left eye to watch the wire. If you use two eyes, you can't see both sides of the inner outer part of the bobbin. So I'm looking for the inner side of the bobbin, then I proceed to wind, and I can watch the shadowing. And I always keep the bobbin moving. If you leave it set in one spot for too long, you start getting a hump or buildup, and then the actual magnet wire can slide off and give you some baggy loops, which aren't good because you get air pockets within the coil. Some people put tape around their fingers, but I just use my hands because I can feel it. I can feel it pull, and I can feel if it gets too hot, then I know I'm putting too much tension on the wire. So this way I can really control it. And what I'm doing too is I'm holding the wire straight up from the center of the spool, and that way I get a nice amount of tension.
Seymour knows more about pickups than almost anybody else, and he made his versions of just about every single pickup that there is on the market, and then some,
I taught myself to play on E-tuning because I just made a chord that sounded nice, and that's nice, and then you just... And I just used to sit making tunes up at home, very happy. There was no videos in them days, and I used to watch whenever I possibly could a photograph or any footage of Ry Cooder to see where his fingers were going, to try and work out what tuning he was, because living in Middlesbrough in those days, it wasn't the easiest place in the world to try and get in touch with Ry Cooder and say, hello, I live in Middlesbrough, what type of guitar and what sort of tuning do you use? Middlesbrough in them days was a long, long way from London, and even further from California. And I once tried to get in touch with him at Newcastle City Hall, but I couldn't get to him. And that's how I arrived at the Fender Strat. So I went out looking for the Ry Cooder sound. And I found this one, which, funnily enough, isn't as hard as a normal Strat. A lot of people said, it's not good enough. And yet it's got such a lovely, soft sort of tone to it, very thick, creamy tone. That I liked it. It reminded me of the Ry Cooder thing. And I like the thickness of the notes down below, because I play a lot of my slide guitar on the low strings. All that. I find, when I feel aggressive, I can really dig in with the vibrato, and it's... I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot. This is why I do what I do. I got very bad arthritis. I've had 2 operations on this hand, and that put pay to any sort of Jeff Beck sort of speed, anything like that, and any Knopfler precision. I've long since learnt that it will not be me, you know. And actually, quite conveniently, the bottleneck just sits nicely on the duff little finger, you know. So I use two types of bottlenecks. This one I use, I dread ever losing it. I've only got another one that's exactly the same weight and size. And this one I use for, like, if we're doing Hawaiian type stuff and I want to really turn the Stratocaster, because on the old Stratocasters, if you turn the volume down, the tone becomes a lot mellower. And sometimes you're playing so quiet, if you're playing some nice Hawaiian sort of, or violin-y strokes, that the brass one tends to rattle and scratch a little bit too much. So I use the glass one for that. I can't use the famous Corsidrin bottle for the bottleneck. I can't use them because the bottom here is a proper glass bottom, and your finger sweats like billy-o. And then when you pick a normal guitar up and you go to use your little finger, you just slice straight through your finger because it's all wet, you know. So that's why I use that one.
Have you managed to meet up with him since?
I haven't, no. If I met him now, yeah, I'm not too sure. Because I've now developed my own. I suppose I'd ask him about the other guitars that he uses now. Now that I know about the Fender side of it, I'd probably talk to him about detuning, which is a serious issue. If you're for about 20 people in the world, you know, detuning is a serious issue. To most people in the music business, it doesn't mean a thing. That's probably what I'd ask him about string gauges with detuning.
Okay, well this is the first one I had. And I was just out of high school, and I was about 17, I guess. That's about how old you are when you get out. And they called me to Buddha Records, or was it Blue Thumb, or one or the other, or both, had signed Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band. They were out of the desert here in Lancaster. And they had a record deal with them, and they wanted to record, and the band had some issues of organization, and I knew Don, the leader, and my name must have come up, I can't think how, quite looking back now. So Bob Krasnow ran the company, and he called me up. I didn't know him, I had never heard of him. I mean, I'm just out of high school, for heaven's sake. I had a car, is about all I had. I had a car and a Martin guitar, and that was it. I had a mandolin. I had two things. Well, anyway, so Krasnow called up and says, come on down to the office. And I went down to the office, and he's sitting there saying, we got this band, they're going to be big, but you need to help us. I said, what do you need me for? He said, well, you need to help these guys rehearse for this record, get ready to record. Oh, and we're going to get the band some equipment. You know, they'd signed him. It was typical in those days. You would outfit a band if they didn't have stuff, you know, amps and things. Most musicians, if they were young and poor, they didn't have very much of anything. They could use some gear. It was a sort of a lure, too, a corporate lure, you know. Keep them kind of like close. It's such a question of liability at that point, you might even say. So Krasnow says, what do you need? And I says, well, I guess I could use an electric guitar. I don't have one, you know. If I'm going to work with this band, or if I'm going to do any work, I should have one. So they sent us down to the Fender factory, which was in Fullerton at the time. And I knew the Fenders existed. I'd seen photographs, Buddy Holly, and I heard that music. I didn't know anything about it. So I was a folk player, you see, blues or country music or whatever, and I did not know anything about these guitars. Believe me, I didn't. I never even thought about it. So we go in there. I mean, I was aware there was a Gibson guitar, there was such a thing as a Fender guitar, and so on. That's all I knew here in Santa Monica. So went in there, and there was a guy who was the rep. I suppose he was his task was to be a liaison with these bands, and they would come in, and these Beefheart guys came in. They were sort of desert rat guys from the desert and all, and they took whatever they took. I don't even recall it anymore, but the guy says to me, what do you want? I said, well, let me see what it is. So he takes me into this room, and there's all these Fenders. The whole line was there, all kinds of different ones. And I like the color of this. So I said, that's pretty, I like that. So he says, well, take it. So I took it, and at the time it had the regular Fender Strat pickups. It did not have any of this stuff on it, you know, it was stock. So I took the thing and I played it for years that way. Later on, I got signed to Warner Brothers Records. I was about 22 at the time, make my own albums and things, and I had this guitar. And by that time, I had an amp too. And I played it, and I was doing bottleneck and finger style, not with a pick. I don't use picks. And what began to bother me, especially with bottleneck, was this bridge pickup that was here. It was a very tight sound. I mean, the strings went through the body, and at this point in the instruments, you know, you have no string excursion at all. Your strings are just, they're just strapped in, and that's all they're going to do. Up here, it's a different story. But up here, it's a little on the loose side because of the way the tension on these things operates, you know, which, of course, I tried to study it and think, what should I do? So a friend of mine had an old P90. So we routed out the body and put that old P90 in here, and it was softer. It wasn't as gritty sounding. It was a little nicer. So you could play your bottleneck, because when you move glass on the string, it's a lot different moving your skin on the string. Skin is soft, and it's compensational to a certain extent, but the glass is like just glass, very hard surface. So no matter what you would do with distortion or things, trying to loosen up the sound, to ease the sound off so it wouldn't hurt your teeth, you know, grate on you and make that horrible screechy sound I don't like. So the P90 was not bad. So it was not bad, but it was not good. It didn't have high end that I wanted, some kind of transparent high end like an acoustic has. This is what bothered me about these darn solid body guitars. They don't move any air around, because I was used to the box and it had the air in the box. And that's the thing that created the harmonics that you could play with, especially if you're doing this glass deal. You use the harmonics, and it's an occurrence, and so forth. But the solid body guitar has got none of that. It wants to avoid it. Why they invented it, so it wouldn't feed back, so it wouldn't howl, and you could turn it up loud. We wanted to be loud. The hillbillies were getting loud. They're playing snare drums. These guys that Leo knew down in South Central LA and Pedro and the docks, these were country western guys playing for the transplanted Okies and Arkies who were working in the defense factories and the shipyards, and they were kicking it pretty hard. They wanted to play snare drums, and that's the thing that made the difference, was when the snare drum appeared, then the poor guitar player is like out in the back somewhere. That's no good. He wants to get loud. Well, then the bass player, well, golly, I want to get loud. So Leo invents the bass, the Fender bass, and then all of a sudden you have bass instead of this upright that's falling behind. So the acoustic sound and properties fell behind on stage, on these little stages in these bars. You can imagine the ceilings here. And these guys have got to pump and kick it, and it was working. The people liked it, because the trend in American music historically is to be louder. How that's done is the trick, you know. And Leo did a lot to promote that notion that loud was good. Of course, then it created problems in the recording studios, as we all know, because they weren't used to it. How in the hell do you record a loud band? Buddy Holly was the loudest band this engineer once told me he'd ever heard. And you know they weren't very loud. By today's standards, nothing. We had to figure out how to mic that. We had to figure out how to get that sound right. What were we going to do? These guys come out and they play real hard, and it's real toppy and thin, and what the hell are we going to do there? Says the engineer. So through the years, I kept this guitar, still have it, and it's gotten to its present stage, which I think is the right sound that it makes now. It makes the sound that I was looking for all those years. But since no one will teach you or tell you anything, by that I mean there's no instruction. How sound is, where it comes from, what can you do? You have to do it for yourself, and that's what these two instruments are all about, basically. It's just me trying to get somewhere, you know, trying to achieve something that I guess at this point in time I could say pretty well achieved. I like the way they sound. It bothered me for years. Why I started on this one was because this one was bothering me. And I like this one. It's chunky, but it didn't extend on the top. So I started fiddling with this guitar. My old friend Jim Dickinson said, "Bad mistake." He said, "That blue one, that's your instrument. You're making a bad mistake." So I said, well, hell, I'm going to make mistakes, I guess. I'll keep trying. Well, the first thing I thought was I could reduce in those days the stringiness, that raspiness with the glass by using flat wound strings. Because round wound strings, of course, are so rough. You drag that glass across them, and it doesn't sound good. It makes too much noise. And they bounce. They're always bouncing and going all over. So somebody told me, put jazz guitar strings. It'll calm the instrument down. You'll get more power, but you'll get less screech, which turned out to be, I don't know who told me that. It was really true. At that time, all you could get was Fenders and Gibsons. Well, they're still probably the best flat wounds. Heavy gauge. I got to where I was putting a 14 up here. Now it's a 12. 14 isn't too much. 14 was so thick that it didn't move at all, and it choked out, and so I stopped doing that. But this guitar sounds best with flat wounds. It does not sound good with round wounds. It doesn't do anything. It's like it's asleep. But you put flat wounds down and you play these pretty chords, I was also obsessed with Curtis Mayfield, trying to sound like him. And it seemed to me that the flat wounds drew me closer to that soft, kind of warm sound that he had. Whereas on this one here, since this is now my main bottleneck guitar, has been for years, this has your round wounds, but there are certain, I forget what they are, but they're not so stringy. They're heavy, but this instrument's no good with the flat wounds. This thing just doesn't sound like anything. It sounds like mud. They're having to do with the bridges and stuff.
What did you actually do to that one then? It looked kind of...
Well, this has never been a real guitar. This is in pieces. This was a Buddy Holly body, a repro, that I had lying around in this guitar shop I saw, and I said, "Give me that." I bought that from him. And then David Lindley gave me this neck, which is amazing. It's a C neck, and therefore it's wider with some sort of custom order thing, which is very, very good for me, and perfect, in fact. And great for bottleneck, because if your strings are too close together, your bottleneck, you're just all over the map. You can't control the note individually, and it's a hassle. So we got the C neck. Somebody bolted it on. At that time, it had no pickups at all. It was just a blank, you might say. So I had this bright idea. The Oahu lap steels, which are made in Chicago, Valco made them. They were like student guitars during the lap steel craze of the early 50s, the Hawaiian craze and all that. Cheap guitars, but the pickup is interesting. So I had one, and when you played bottleneck, it was a terrific sound, like steel guitars sound really good for slides, that's what they're created for. So I said, well, what the hell, why can't I have a nice steel guitar effect in this? Since I can't play flat, I don't like to play flat. So we cut this whole plate out, and John Carruthers simply routed out the body, which was tricky because you have to do it at a certain height, because the strings pass through this thing, obviously, in the Rickenbacker manner. So it's like a sandwich, because the plate on top is magnetic, and of course the poles are magnetic. But there's no clearance. I mean, you're right there. So if you don't guess right or measure right, you know what I mean? You'll be too high or too low, and you can't work. Carruthers good, so he did it right. And we kept the bridge, the original bridge, kept the springs, which turned out to be, the whole trick was the springs. It never dawned on me. This one, I had taken the springs out because I was sick and tired of the tuning going on and off, because I'm in open tunings all the time. And if you change, and those springs, whoa, they go left on you. So what we did, and so that stopped the resonance in this as soon as the springs were gone. But of course, it didn't dawn on me until this guitar came along. I said, well, the springs are important. But we had to put a block in here to keep it from wobbling. All right, so that worked, and that sounded pretty good. Then, because it rocks, this pickup really rocks. It cuts through. You can play with a big, loud rock band, or you can, in a session, you can really be heard. But it lacks warmth. It's a good rock pickup, but it lacks warmth. So then, the big discovery was I make no secret of it because it wasn't my idea, was Lindley telling me the Teisco is what you want. These Teisco pickups are made in the 60s on the Sears guitars that Teisco in Japan made for export. Howlin' Wolf played one. What more do you need to know? So we went out and got one. He gave this to me, actually, Lindley did. He had it in the drawer and put it in, and there it was. It was this enormous bubble of resonance. And yet you still have the string tension. You haven't given it up, which this provides. This tailpiece loosens up everything, changes the angle, therefore releases the string. But if you do that, you lose this nice string tension that you like to have for bottleneck seat. So this seemed to be the answer, was this thing here, where it was, you know, not too far back, because then it starts to choke out, not too far forward, but right there, a lucky break. And I have to say, this guitar is an amazing thing. Why it sounds like it sounds is just a fluke. People have imitated it. There's been copies made all over the place. They do the same thing I did. They take the thing here and the thing here, and people have done it. And I've played some of these copies, and they don't sound like this. We just came up lucky here. And it really is a good instrument. So between the two, you get your beautiful ballad chordal sound from this. It's very high-end sensitive. Of course, these pickups are another story. What those are is something interesting. And then this one, you play your blues or your bottleneck music on, you know what I mean? And that's it, sort of.
You know, you can give the same Strat to 10 different great guitar players and it will sound like the guitar player, you know. It's where your personality comes out. All the equipment's all well and good and it will help you, but ultimately it's your hands, and that's why, you know, the Fender appeals to me, because it's a guitar that you can stamp your personality on once you get to grips with it.
It's really funny because everybody believes that if you just buy a Fender Stratocaster that you're going to sound like whomever you idolize, you know. But it's not about that, and you learn that after a bit. The guitar has everything that you need in which to do your job, and the rest depends on you, you know. It all depends on how you touch it, how you hold it, how you squeeze the strings, you know, how you, wherever you pick, you know, if you pick by the bridge, if you pick up here, you strum, whatever you do, it all depends on that player, you know. It cracks me up sometimes, you know, kids, you know, they get a certain model Stratocaster and they believe they're going to sound like that, but it takes a while to find your own thing.
I mean, all Strats sound sort of similar, but I mean, each player has his own personality, his own approach to the guitar, you know. Like Buddy Guy would be going kind of, oh, hang on, let's see, yeah. Very kind of staccato. Or say Buddy Holly, who would have been using fairly medium gauge strings, didn't really do lead lines except maybe. Of course, you get a great. It's a good guitar for Buddy Holly stuff. I mean, Hank obviously gets that ultra true, clean sound. Hank, to my best of my knowledge, doesn't use the in-between sounds that much. He tends to use the clear one, whichever pickup he's using at the time, you know. Yeah. Sorry, Hank. I need the tremolo for that. I don't know. Eric Clapton, Robert Cray, people like that use the in-between sound a lot, and I mean, Eric plays since he moved from the Gibson to the Strat. It has changed his playing slightly, but he still gets quite a big tone, and he has a very eloquent sort of kind of overtone he gets, you know. But I suppose the nice thing is that aside from lead guitar, it's got a lovely rhythm guitar sound, so it doesn't sound too mushy or muddy, you know. Of course, Ry Cooder plays great slide on a Strat. At one point he put a P90 pickup here, which worked very well, but most of the time he's just using a regular Strat, if he's not using one of these Supros or Dan Electros or whatever. But really, it's very hard to describe anyone's style. But it's strange that so many people play Strats nowadays. It's just that versatile guitar. I mean, you can get even soul guitarists like it, you know. And you can play. I mean, if your amp is dirty enough, or if you're using distortion, you can get quite a nasty, raunchy sound. But I suppose this is why Hendrix was really the man in a lot of respects, because he went from clean rhythm to extreme distortion and a lot of effects and so on. So it's a credit to the instrument that you can do any, and plus it doesn't break in your hands if you attack it too fairly harshly, you know. So it's going to be around for a while yet, I'd say.
Could you describe some of your techniques for us?
It's quite hard really to look in on yourself and say, I do this, I do that. No, I like to play rhythm, and also I don't really have little tricks that I can think of. I also use a lot of damping for certain parts. Also, if I'm doing a solo, I quite often take the edge off the song, so it's not quite as bright as most Strats. I try and aim at something like a cross between a Tele sound, a P90 pickup, and a Strat sound. I don't really do that many tricks. Sometimes I do this string pulling thing, like, which is something like a tremolo arm thing, or if you want to be really showy, you can kind of pull the string out. But I mean, you have to be in full flight, like I said before, for that kind of thing. So I just try and do everything I can that feels right for the song. The great thing is in your subconsciously you can change pickups, maybe use one position for the verses, one for the solo, or even halfway through the solo change it without it being a big deal of, you know, changing this, you know. But somebody else would be better at explaining my style than I would, because I don't really have a textbook style, you know what I mean?
I think that what makes a great guitar player is when you find your voice, when you find that one thing that really sets you apart from someone. And perhaps you may play it unorthodox, perhaps you have a different way of approaching it or attacking it, but that's your voice. That's what makes you unique.
When I play, a lot of times, I'm a lot of times on the neck pickup when I solo, and there's a cool sound that I like to get with the Strat. With if I want like a heavy rhythm tone, I'll go for the middle position. Not the, I'm sorry, not the middle position, but the between position, where it's these two pickups or these two. And sometimes in the studio, you know, I'll have these two pickups on one side, and then I'll double it with these two pickups on the other side. And it just gives it a really fat kind of sound without being too fuzzy, and just that loud, kind of clear, ballsy sound, you know.
When I got my first Strat, which was this one, I'd written a song called Sultans of Swing, and I'd written it with a different tune, and I'd written it actually on a National steel guitar in open tuning. It had a different tune, but I was so into my Strat when I got it, just the sound of it, you know, it just. So, I mean, I started thinking another way. Just another set of music for the song, and so that's an example of where the instrument that you're playing affects what you write.
It's the tool that I had. I mean, you don't have much when you're starting, you know, what are you going to do? So this was was a means to a sound and an approach, and I liked it, so I kept doing it. If you like something, you'll keep doing it, and then you try to make something out of it, you know, something useful that people will respond to, or that you can make a statement on. That's what it's all about. I mean, there's 10,000 million trillion guitar players, especially in Los Angeles. You know how it is. Not like now where there's 10 to the 10th power trillion million guitar players, but I'm talking about in the 60s and after. It was happening, you know, it was on. So you had to do something. And the idea was, I always thought, if everybody does something, don't do it. I saw Clarence White, we were teenagers, and he's a couple of years older than me, one maybe. I saw him play with a flat pick and do what he did. I said, forget it. Flat pick, forget it. That's the man that broke through. I can't do that. I can't physically do it, let alone understand it, so I'm not gonna even try. Everybody's going around flat pick real fast. I said, that's because they hadn't seen Clarence. Once you saw Clarence, you had to think about it. So I thought, I'm going to stick with what I got, and we'll see.
The versatility of the Stratocaster was recognized by the late Zimbabwean singer-guitarist Jonas Sithole, seen here on stage in Harare in 1993. A close musical collaborator with the Chimurenga singer Thomas Mapfumo, Sithole was the first musician to transpose African mbira music to electric guitar, a seemingly incongruous fusion. The mbira, a traditional African instrument, is a multi-pronged thumb piano of ancient origin, integral to African ritual and spirituality. Although banned by the Catholic Church during the Rhodesian colonial era, the mbira was merely driven underground, where it provided a soundtrack to the War of Liberation. After independence, the mbira resurfaced with vigor through musicians like Stella Shiweshi, who plays her mbira through a Fender Twin Reverb. With his own band Deep Horizon and Mapfumo's Blacks Unlimited, Jonas Sithole developed a technique of playing mbira music on a Stratocaster, taking African music into the 21st century. Was it difficult?
Yeah, at first it was difficult, I must confess. Because you see, the mbira, it has got some off notes, right? Flat notes, which you can never find in the guitar. You see? So if you want to say a minor note, minor, Major, okay, is standard, small standard. But if you want to play the minor, you can never find it. But that is which is very unique in the mbira. That sort of discord note, that's what makes the mbira to be what it is. So one has to understand that first. Yeah, before you start on trying to imitate the mbira, you have to understand the mbira first. And you have to have the feel of it. Understand it, it must get into you. So that you have to follow the mbira. It was so difficult to imitate the mbira because the mbira is being tuned differently. Then you have our standard tuning to imitate the mbira. So it really, even now, there are very few guitarists who can really synchronize minor and major at the same level, at the same number, same tune. It's difficult, but I can do it.
When Leo Fender began his modest operation from his old shop in Fullerton during the early 1950s, he had no idea that by the 21st century, his Stratocaster guitar would be played around the world. Fender instruments are today manufactured at this modern plant in Corona, California. To pay homage to the 60-year history of the company, the city of Corona has established a museum and music academy to nurture a new generation of musicians.
Our focus here, our main mission is to provide free and low-cost music education to children throughout the community. We also have a wonderful museum here. The school accommodates about 600 kids a week. We teach them guitar, piano, drums, voice, and then we have combo band from that. And it's first come, first serve, and kids stay in here until they turn 18 years old. We get people of all ages, and they come from all over the world, actually. We have a guest book, people sign in, and a lot of international people come here to see this facility. There's a lot of great custom shop guitars here on display, a lot of history here, and we just love to pay tribute to the Fender name. The very beginning of how Fender started with Leo Fender and Don Randall is very key. And also the custom shop. They want to see how a guitar is built. So we have the DVD that plays, we have the workbench, and they can sit and be part of it. And the factory is actually just about 4 miles west of us. So they're very, very close, and they're not open to the public to be able to go through and go through touring. So this is a great opportunity for people to come and see.
What visitors see at the Fender Academy is but a taste of the Stratocaster manufacturing process, which is by now a worldwide phenomenon, with Leo's design replicated and copied on a global scale. The Strat is a design icon of modern times, destined to be played to eternity.
As far as evolving is concerned, it's hardly any different. What else can you look at that's hardly any different? It's amazing that the darn thing still, all of the clones look bad. They look stupid, most of them do. I don't like them. But, you know, it means something, or they wouldn't buy it. The fella I know who runs True Tone Music here in Santa Monica, where I get a lot of things, says his sales are up like never before. I said, well, who are your customers? Professionals? Not so much. hobbyists. People with some money, you know, discretionary money, they can go out and buy a guitar. Then they get another one, then they get an amp. What are they doing? They're trying to do something for themselves to find self-expression and to connect with something. Maybe they work at the computer store all day, or maybe they're doctors or lawyers, like he calls them doctor lawyers. You know, in other words, working, in other words, trying to hang into society. It's getting harder to do. But they need something. They need to connect to something. Music is it's a good connective tissue thing. And so we don't know what they're going to play and how it's going to be done, but I guess it's a universal, ancient idea, you know, it's like talking.
And when you think about it, the Stratocaster is the guitar that gave birth to rock and roll through Buddy Holly and through Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Iron Maiden. I mean, this guitar was right there as all these seminal bands created the music that provided the foundation for rock and roll music. And as long as kids are playing music because it motivates them and maybe even annoys their parents a little bit, as long as kids want to emulate their heroes from way back when, they're going to be playing Stratocasters. It's just a fact.
I'll take it.
Leo Fender came up with a doozy, a real winner.